Hello, this is David with Stupid Things People Do and what we can learn from them. I'm still bald and I will remain bald for the foreseeable future. Last time we talked about Nazis, Github, and firing Jewish employees who were being concerned about the Camp Auschwitz staff that were abroad during the January 6 protests. You may remember our takeaway on that issue was that Github, after messing up something horrible, handled the issue well, admitting their mistake, and they took steps to correct the issue. But navigating a crisis isn't simple. If you've recently had to fire management for replicating the Stanford prison experiments with the interns, you're probably not going to be able to just copy and paste GitHub's apology letter. Workplace misconduct is as limitless as people are inventive. You'll want to fine-tune your response to the offense, the victim, your industry context, international context. And sometimes that fine-tuning will mean saying nothing at all. For example, a few years back, there were some issues in the senior management of a church. We have no clue what the issues were, as only a brief public statement was made, so I'm just going to jump to the conclusion that it's the Stanford prison experiments because that's how my mind works. Anyway, after investigation, several members of senior management were permanently removed from their positions or they were fired. But like I said, only a brief public statement was actually made, one with no details. And we know this because an article noted that, quote, saying nothing about what types of violations occurred heightens the risk that wrongful behavior will be repeated elsewhere, by the former employees, of course. The general attitude at the time was that the denomination would surely be forced to say more. But it's been years, and there's been practically no press, and no public outcry for information. This denomination received no backlash from their less is more strategy to crisis management. So in our original example, GitHub did the right thing. They admitted fault, they corrected their mistakes, and they did so publicly. But am I implying that this denomination also did the right thing? Well, without knowing how many cattle prods were involved in their Stanford prison experiments, I can't say for sure they did the right thing morally, but it does seem their less is more approach worked strategically. And that's exactly what we would expect from criminal masterminds. A quick aside, the attorneys want me to make it very clear I am joking about this denomination being criminal masterminds or conducting Stanford prison experiments. In real life, they're almost certainly not supervillains. But the point I'm trying to make is to highlight the animosity towards an organization that media silence can create. If left to their own devices and imaginations, people can fill in the blanks in horrifying ways, aka Stanford prison experiments and criminal masterminds. But there's this line we need to walk here. Saying too little can create PR nightmares as people fill in the blanks with horrible what-if scenarios. In short, a strict no-comment policy can generate incredible hostility from the general populace. But an Ask Me Anything approach can have just as huge legal implications, ranging from creating lawsuit-fueling liability to generating defamation or privacy claims. So there's been allegations. What should you do? I don't know. That's a question for your legal team and your PR team. But what I do know is the kind of questions you should be asking. The first question to look at is, what kind of crisis do you have on your hands? A single incident of an employee plinking another employee in the back of the head with a paintball, or a similar isolated misconduct, that's not likely to garner national attention. But if the misconduct you're looking at is not a single isolated incident, but something systemic or incredibly severe, well, you have to consider if the crisis is likely to make national news or become the subject of shop talk in your industry, you may need to make a short statement. Note, in the denominational Stanford prison experiments, they didn't say nothing. They actually did make a short statement. It just wasn't a very detailed one. The second thing to consider is whether the incident is likely to blow over or blow up if you can't get out in front of it. This is nearly impossible to predict with certainty, but you do need to be able to make some kind of guess, and that's where PR firms are going to be involved. If you're not an expert, you really don't want to roll the dice on this one. Also, whether the incident is going to blow over or blow up, that's going to depend on the misconduct, and it's also going to depend on who's involved. So, for example, you might think the misconduct was low level and it's going to blow over, but if there's a victim's advocacy group involved, those groups do exist for a reason, and they're not likely to just let allegations blow over. Advocacy groups raison d'etre, raison d'etre, their reason for existence. It brings us to the third point, warning others of the misconduct. If you're dealing with serious sexual offenses or abuse directed towards children, There's likely some responsibility, moral, if not legal, to warn others of the risk. The problem with doing this is that warning people carries an extraordinary risk that the ex-employee will file a defamation lawsuit, claiming that their former employer is lying about the misconduct. Even if you are absolutely certain of the facts, abusers are often narcissists, and narcissists are often retaliatory. And speaking of facts, that raises the fourth consideration. How certain are you of those facts? If it's a blatant and undisputed reality that middle management was using cattle prods to incite overtime work from the interns, going public is probably less risky. Whereas if the very existence of cattle prods to begin with is in question, you may need to be more careful. Going public can also create credibility issues, such as social memory contamination. If you're going to be involved in an ongoing investigation, that is an important consideration. Quick aside, memory contamination is a little bit like the Mandela effect, where a publicly agreed upon narrative causes individuals to remember things that did not happen, or perhaps remember them very differently. Speaking of investigations and victims advocacy groups, part of the goal here is to protect people who have been harmed. So you have to consider, would going public with an allegation discourage potential victims from coming forward? Sometimes, depending on the allegation, it might. Then again, sometimes going public with allegations can create a #MeToo-like effect where the victims feel emboldened to come forward with their stories. None of these questions have clear, simple, or concise answers. They're going to change completely based on context. But these are the sort of questions you'll want to be discussing with your legal team, PR team, and investigators to figure out how to best respond to misconduct allegations, especially if those allegations are likely to result in a lawsuit. You may want to discuss with legal counsel before taking action. Thank you for listening. I'm Bolt. I'll see you next time.